Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Ryan. I'm the author of Always Music in the Air and Fire Walk with Me. And what do we think of Blue Velvet? We're about to have a discussion with Fred Elmes and Duwayne Dunham, but first, a few announcements. Stay tuned. We're going to have a Mark Frost movie, Storyville. Mark couldn't make it, and because he was going to be here, I ordered like a ton of conversations with Mark Frost that he was going to sign. So I have way more books than I'll sign, so because of that, I'm only going to sell them for $5. It's a $30 book. So if you want to learn about Mark Frost, which you should, if you own Room to Dream, you should own Conversations with Mark Frost. They're equally important. Am I right, Matt?
Oh, yeah.
Who's going to argue with Matt? And also, I'm always promoting coming to George Griffith's movie, From the Head. It's on Thursday. You've never heard of it, maybe? And it's so good. I love 90s movies. It has a 90s feel to it. And also, there's a great poster here. You should pick it up. I'm sure Duwayne and Fred would be happy to sign it for you, and all the guests all week. It's beautiful, and Sean Longmore made it. It's incredible. Did I remember everything, Daniel?
You're good.
I'm good. Let's bring up our guests. I would say really nice things about them, but Daniel's intro to them was so much that I don't want them to get a big head before they go up there, you know what I mean? So this is Fred Elmes, who is the cinematographer. This is Duwayne Dunham. His favorite character from Star Wars is a Jawa. I know it's Boba Fett, but mine is the Jawa, and I haven't mentioned the Jawa to you the whole weekend yet, so I have to at this point. It's tradition. I'm going to start with the same question I had last night. You guys haven't seen this in a while. What stuck out to you, seeing it for the first time? And I'm going to say, compared to your work, what did you see from your own work in this film? We'll start with you, Fred.
Me?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. I'm one that's generally pretty self-critical. The first time we saw an edit of the movie, way before it was finished, all I see is the mistakes. All I see is in every shot, everything that I did wrong. So it made it very hard to concentrate on the film. It comes together. The story is so tight, and I have to think that it is. It was in David's head from the beginning, but the ability to take that idea off paper and to concentrate it down into a distilled 2-hour movie is such a difficult task, but I think that he and Duwayne did such a beautiful job of pulling all that stuff together. I remember sitting in the room, in the mix room, the first time that I saw it all come together without the finished picture, but with the finished edit and the final music track. It was so very powerful. That I was moved in a way that I didn't understand, because it was so much more powerful than when we were there making it.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Duwayne? What did you notice about your edit?
I don't, cut me off whenever you want, because this was a...
That'll be enough.
Every time you see a movie, and I haven't seen Blue Velvet in a while, but every time you see a movie, I don't care how many times you've seen it, but every time, and especially in the process of editing a film, you want to screen, and you want to screen with an audience, because every single time it's different. The audience is different, your mood is different, your experience going into the... And today I gotta tell you, I've never watched this movie in this light. And it's because the movie was 3 hours and 57 minutes in length in the first cut. And it was just about 3 of us in the screening room at Fantasy up in Berkeley. And when it was over, David sat quiet for a few minutes, and then he just said, wow, I really like it. I like it just like this. And I'm thinking, this easy. I'm done. And then David said, my only problem is I have one problem, okay? In order for me, David, to have final cut, it had to be no longer than 2 hours in length. What you just saw is 2 frames shorter than 2 hours in length. And those 2 frames was in case the negative cutter made a mistake. And I will say, we can get into this further, but, and Fred knows this because he knows the 2 hours that aren't here. This is the first time I've watched the movie. I spent so much time with David in the cutting room saying, David, is Dorothy a participant or is she a victim? And editing, what you see here in David's genius is the subtext. The text is what you see on the screen. It's the subtext that moves you and makes you uneasy. And that's what we do in the cutting room. And I kept saying, David, is Dorothy a participant or is she a victim? And for months, he would say, it doesn't matter. What do you think? And I say, well, I think it makes a big difference, not for her, but it makes a huge difference for Jeffrey. And I watched it tonight through the lens of those early scenes we removed of Jeffrey, where Jeffrey was definitely tipping the scale on the side of, when what's her name, Sandy says, I don't know if you're a something or a detective or a pervert. Whoa, yeah. If you looked at what we cut out, there's no question. and so these things make a huge difference, and there's 2 places where David changed the dialogue, so simple but so profound. And one is, and you don't see it, but when Frank came in, accosted Dorothy, and Jeffrey's in the closet, and she goes into the back bathroom, and Jeffrey goes, she's playing in the sink in the blood, and I think he threw the ear or something in the toilet, and it was a different scene, and Jeffrey walks down that hallway, and he stands watching her for a few minutes, and she's saying over and over and over, hit me, hurt me, hit me, hurt me. And one night, as it tends to happen, it was early in the morning, it was late, we're in the cutting room and running that scene, and all of a sudden I got it! And David says, what do you got? He says, I got it. She's gonna say, help me. The difference between hurt me, hit me, and help me is huge. Because if she was saying hit me, hurt me, and Jeffrey's like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow, well, okay. But it was help me, and then that's the last word you hear in this version just before Jeffrey walks away, says help me. The second instance was in the car in the joyride. Jeffrey punches Frank, and Frank says to Jeffrey, you're like me. Again, you take those scenes that got removed, and now I'm watching it tonight, and I'm thinking, dang, he is kind of like him. Anyway, those were my observations.
But those are the wonderful things that you do discover in the editing room as you reshape the story, and you take what you photographed that was the dialogue on the page, and with all good intention at the time. You believed it and you believed in it, but then as the shoot went on, you would change subtle things about the characters, and when you get into the editing room, you change more subtle things, and you rely on that music, the emotion that comes with the music, and the swell of the effects and all that, to kind of reshape the story that you started with, and that's kind of part of what I think David Lynch was so beautiful at doing was realizing exactly where it started, where it is now, and where it needs to go, and how to just gently massage the story, the final version, to get all that feeling correct.
The two choices were victim or participant?
Yes.
All right, audience, I want to hear, how many of you think she was a victim? Let's clap. And how many think participant? Interesting. That's interesting.
Now, I have
isn't
an
it?
interesting observation, because during the shooting, as each character develops their own reasoning for being there, Dennis Hopper often referred to himself as the victim of Dorothy's manipulation. So it depends on your perspective, it's just
Everyone has their own
It is something
side.
that the actors do
Right.
to keep their feet on the ground, and he may have been joking about that, but
But also, as an actor, is probably moving forward with that. Fred, what did you do to light Laura Dern to make her so angelic versus how you're lighting Dennis Hopper?
Well, Laura's quite beautiful, I think, and it wasn't so difficult. Really, she and Isabella, together are a great pair to light, to be able to light. I think with her clear complexion and with her blonde hair, she really did glow. And the first opportunity was when she comes out of the shadow on the lawn. And David always envisioned that as a very special introduction of Laura's character. And I at first didn't kind of get what he wanted out of that moment. But he said, she's not there, and then she just appears. And it's not
How
as
did
if
she
she
do
walks out of a shadow. She materializes, and so we had kind of lined up the shot where Jeffrey was walking away from the house, and he stopped and listened, and we had some room to put Laura back away from the camera and the light, and let her move forward. But when I tried it and did a lighting on it and showed it to David, he said, "Well, no, she comes much too fast. She just appears in the light, and that's not right. It has no mood. It has to be very, very gradual." So I said, "Well, we need more room. We'll have to move the camera back further so that the light can fall off more." And we used a special trick where we dimmed the light up as well on her. So it's a couple of things all together there. And you notice in the edit, which is brilliant, it's a wide shot of Jeffrey walking away from the house, and you hear the voice, and he stops, and he turns, and you pause, and you pause, and you pause, and then you cut to blackness, and then she comes out. So they did everything to stretch that moment out and let the music swell and really, give her the entrance that David wanted.
It's a beautiful shot. It's reminiscent of Lost Highway, I feel like, with Bill Pullman, just in a different way. Duwayne, you had the ability to, that's your first job with David,
Yeah.
and you're editing with him, but you also edited David's last job, The Return.
Yes.
So tell me the difference of those two directors, the director from The Return versus the director of Blue Velvet.
They're mostly there's a big difference, but mostly the same. And to that shot of Laura Dern coming up, David was fascinated with people coming out of darkness. All of his movies. We had so many conversations in the cutting room, both literally and metaphorically. People coming out of darkness was a thing for him. And, you know, I did Blue Velvet and Wild at Heart and Twin Peaks, and then we got to The Return. And I was with David, and David had a rough go. Every movie I think he's ever made, it's been met with a lot of, some people think like it's brilliant, and some people think, what is this? And they don't know, and I think David likes it that way. But when we got to The Return, I did say to David, I said, David, you know, because I'm always the one that's cutting everything he does in half. And I think that was good for him. But when it came to The Return, I said, David, you know, at this point in our career, you've earned the right. You do it exactly the way you want it. I'm just going to be here and you know, sort of steer the ship a little bit. And you know, I'm not going to talk to you about it's too long. It's yours now, and that's the way we did it. So a 9-hour commitment to Showtime turned into 18 hours. You see the correlation that's cutting out. In fact, when David said, I want you to cut it, I said, well, how long is it? You know, how many episodes? He says, it's not episodes, it's chapters. And it's a big, giant movie. And it's just one after the other. And I said, all right, so how many chapters? He says, 9. And I laughed and I said, okay, 9, or 10, or 11, or 12. And he laughed and said, or 13, or 14. And so, you know, we had 6 hours of cut footage on the shelf 2.5 months after he started shooting. And we had 1 year. One exact year, September 4 to September 4, to deliver this thing, a cut picture. We delivered 9 2-hour movies in 1 year.
Wow, it's incredible.
It's nuts. You don't do that.
Yeah, that's so exciting. And Duwayne will be around for the Twin Peaks pilot, which we'll be playing, so we'll get more Twin Peaks stories. We're also showing this week River's Edge. And Fred worked on River's Edge, which is an incredible movie. Can you tell us something, Fred, from making River's Edge, since you won't be here that day?
River's Edge was a very dear movie for me. A director named Tim Hunter
from Twin Peaks
directed it, and he was a buddy of mine. It's a wonderful story to begin with, based on a true story about some high school teenagers who who palled around together, but one of whom kills his girlfriend and then brings his friends to see the body, and no one says much of anything about it. So it is based on a true story that was in the papers in and around Sacramento, California back then. It's interesting because Tim Hunter, the director, rounded up some really young and brilliant actors, Keanu Reeves and Crispin Glover and Ione Skye, people who hadn't done much work, who he felt were really talented, and it was fascinating because Dennis Hopper is also a character between Blue Velvet and The River's Edge films as well, and we were sitting in the pre-production around a table doing a read of the script, and there were these young actors so ready to go to meet Dennis Hopper, their idol, you know, the actor that they've been not only waiting for, but waiting to work with as an opportunity, and you know, the just sort of James Dean character of their imagination, and Dennis, going into both Blue Velvet and River's Edge, had a pretty nasty reputation. He had been the bad boy of Hollywood, and people wouldn't hire him. But for this table read for River's Edge, he came in wearing a three-piece suit, carrying a briefcase.
Well-dressed man.
The well-dressed man, but he had transformed himself. He was completely clean and sober, which is how he got the job on Blue Velvet. That David believed in him, believed he could do it, and convinced the producers that this was all going to work out just fine. And Dennis, you know, was an exemplary character to work with.
I like that that connects both films. Watching Blue Velvet today, it's still kind of shocking. It still, you know, moves us and disturbs us. But this movie came out in the middle of the 80s. How did this movie land? Take us back to that. Do you guys have stories of it coming out?
It was pretty mixed. There were good reviews, and there were not such good reviews. Pauline Kael, as I remember, just loved it, but some of the others were pretty harsh and critical about it.
What about for you, Duwayne? Was it similar to Return of the Jedi?
No. The difference is, though, the critics, they tend not to so much pan the movie as they attack David. And I felt that, I've always thought that's unfair. It's just not fair. You try it someday. You try and put somebody up on screen. You try to photograph them. You try to emote some sort of elicit an emotional reaction. If you can do that, you deserve an award. David is great at that. And the difference, seeing Wild at Heart last night and Blue Velvet now, from then and today, the world's a much more screwed up place. So when you talk about, you know, the world's crazy, wild at heart, and you know, why are there people like Frank, and you can rattle them off now. And, you know, it's a strange world. It tends to resonate more today for me than it did back then.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. That's why it's so jarring that these movies came out. And I remember Dennis Hopper, he won the Oscar that year, but for Hoosiers, right?
Yeah,
Which
that's right. Yeah, they wouldn't give it to him for this one.
I'll tell you what, Dennis Hopper showed up. Dennis wanted this role. And he showed up in North Carolina, Wilmington, in the middle of the Bible Belt. He showed up at the studio, at Dino's studio there, dressed like Frank Booth. He walked down that hallway like Frank Booth, and you should have seen the secretaries in there. Whoa! Everybody's moving out of the way. He was a force of nature, and you don't want any part of that.
And it's interesting because he was cast late in the process.
Yeah.
We had already started shooting, and they didn't have a Frank Booth cast.
He showed
yet.
up, said, "I'm Frank Booth."
And David believed in him every inch of the way, but it took some convincing. And there was one other story that I think David mentioned. When we were shooting, I said to David, "God, this is so. I mean, it's Blue Velvet. It's called Blue Velvet, and the Bobby Vinton version of the song is so beautiful. And I'm so glad you have that." He said, "Well, we don't actually have that." Well, have you asked? Well, yeah, I think we're working on it, but it's not done yet.
So David and Dino De Laurentiis, they had a unique and, I think, wonderful relationship. But I remember outside of screening for David the first time we screened for Dino, we're at Dino's screening room, and there's just a couple of us in the room. And the movie starts, and I don't know, not too long into it, you want to hear critic's voice, you hear, "David, what is this shit?" That's Dino.
from Eraserhead to Blue Velvet. This was your second time, and how did you get that job? I mean, how did that work out? How did David come to you to be the DB?
Well, it's interesting, you know, so we spent a lot of time together on Eraserhead, and stayed in touch, basically. We actually lived near each other in West Hollywood, and David's career really took off. He though nothing happened immediately, he did do The Elephant Man, and he did work on Dune, which I did second unit on. So there were some years in there when he and I, though we weren't in touch every day, stayed close. And I worked, you know, the Dune movie took 6 months to shoot in Mexico, so I was there for that. But Blue Velvet's a story that was with him a long time. He knew the story, he knew the characters, he knew the town, the underside of a small town, and we talked a little bit about it, you know. So we had some notes to compare on the subject of Blue Velvet, and as soon as it became a real possibility, we really started to get more specific about what was in the story Blue Velvet.
And Duwayne, is there anything, you know, there's always that talk that David Lynch was going to direct Return of the Jedi, and you edited that. Does that have something to do with you editing his next film, or there's nothing that connects those?
No, because I didn't personally know David when we did Return of the Jedi, though Stanley Kubrick did run Eraserhead for George and I one night at the studio in L Street outside of London. And whoa, what a bizarre 90 minutes. It definitely left an impression on me as well as George, and then George did offer David the job, and he didn't take it. But it had I didn't know David. He just called one day and said, "I want you to come work for me." And I said, "Maybe you ought to meet me first." And so I flew to LA and got the script and flew home, and I could hardly get off the airplane. I was, 30 pages into the thing and shaking. And it was a while. David kept, he called and said, "Will you do it? I want you to do it." What do you? And I said, "David, I don't know." I said, "I'm kind of a Disney guy." And this is not exactly a Disney movie. And David said something, I'm still trying to figure it out, but any of us that had the absolute pleasure of working with David and being David's friend. You're friend with David, you're friend for life. And I just know that with Blue Velvet, I didn't know, but I said to myself, you share a couple of aw shucks with David and you're good. And when it got down to it, I had a couple of authors and I simply said, okay, who can I learn the most from? And the answer there was very simple. That's David, that guy that did that 2-week-long 90-minute movie called Eraserhead. I got to work with that guy.
Fred, this will be your last time up on stage with us at this event, and it's been an honor and a privilege. You've just watched your 3 works with David, or, as you said, you did Dune as well, but your 3 major ones. What was this experience like for you?
It's a wonderful, I think personally it's a wonderful feeling of closure around David's death. David was sick for a long time. He smoked cigarettes, couldn't quit, and knew that he couldn't quit. And I saw his health declining, and it scared me a great deal. I certainly didn't expect him to die quite so soon. But we were close and we stayed in touch, and having known him for this many years, it was very difficult to see him go suddenly like that. So to to see the movies once more, to talk about it, to see the support that's in the world, you know, for David, and to see organizations like the theater here join together and want to show, want to bring back these movies in a concentrated way is just a beautiful, beautiful thing.
I love that answer. Thank you so much. So, we want to get a picture, and we want to get a picture with them, and to show this audience that's here. I don't know if you guys can give us a little light, if we can see the lights in the audience, and I don't know if you feel like they deserve a standing ovation or not. Picture, I couldn't say, but let's turn around. You can look at our backside.